Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're hailing from. My name is Eric the IT Guy Hendricks, and I am an operations advocate here at Red Hat. And this is Red Hat Enterprise Linux Presents episode 34. Today we are going to be talking about RHEL-based home labs, and I couldn't do it without my trusty co-host, Brian Smith.
Hey Eric, how's it going?
Oh, I am really excited for today's episode. I guess you could say I went out and spent about $1,400 on this episode.
I spent a little
So
bit less than that, so
all right, but we can't get into this conversation without bringing in Nate, without bringing in our host today. Sorry, our guest today. Gosh, it's been a long day. I've summit sessions, what's new decks. I mean, it's been a crazy week. I don't know about y'all, but anyway, Nate is our guest today. He is the podcast host of the Iron Sysadmin podcast and a technical account manager, a TAM here at Red Hat. Nate, welcome to RHEL Presents.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here.
So why don't we start out before we get into our topic today, which is something I'm really passionate about. Let's talk a little bit about you. What do you do here at Red Hat, and what does that mean? What is a TAM?
So a TAM, it sounds like it's so easy to explain, but it's not necessarily easy to explain because we're like this weird blending of consulting, but we're not, support, but we're not. It's like an advisory role is the best way I can describe it, right? So a customer can engage a TAM. We have sync calls with the customer, as frequently as the customer would like. Usually it's like every 2 weeks. We get to know what it is that they do, how they use our software, and we basically do our best to help them use our software. It's really probably the best way to describe it, right? We help them try to identify problems before they happen, be a little more proactive, help them through upgrades, stuff like that. But it's not like hands-on like one of our services folks might be. I never touch the customer's stuff. I just help them manage their stuff.
So it's TAM is kind of an interesting position. I almost went into being a TAM before I came to Red Hat at GitLab. I actually interviewed for a solutions architect, which is pre-sales, and then I also interviewed for a TAM role. I ended up hitting it off with my manager in sales more than I did the TAM manager. But it's almost like the spectrum between sales and support, and TAM's kind of somewhere in the middle because TAMs would often invite solutions architects on to do technical deep dives. But depending on the TAM, you could almost you do a lot of some of the same presentations as. I mean, it's an interesting position. And I think TAM is one of those roles that depends so heavily on the person sitting in the chair. What are their skill sets? I've had people that are much more administrative and just know seems like everyone in the company, whereas other TAMs just want to get in. They want to get in deep, get their hands dirty on the command line and work from there.
Yeah, so it's important to note that every company seems to do TAM a little differently. And at Red Hat, every TAM seems to TAM a little differently. We all have similar objectives, similar goals, but everyone handles the role just a little bit differently, right? Where some companies, the TAM might be on call 24/7, right? They might be more of a sales role. At Red Hat, we are definitely technical. We're not sales. I'm not here to try to, get more Red Hat software into a customer. I'm here to help them use the stuff that they want and suggest things that I think fit well, right? So that is certainly a thing that TAM might do, but we're not here to push sales. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Brian, you were TAM for some time before coming to your current role, weren't you?
yes, yeah, I was a TAM here at Red Hat for about 3 years before I moved over to product management. So yeah, being a TAM here at Red Hat is pretty awesome, and like Nate said, you have a great opportunity to work closely with customers and help them be successful. So it's a really cool role to be in.
Well, and we kind of belabored this point a little bit because if you join us in 2 weeks, we're actually doing an episode about TAMs. So it's kind of funny to have you, Nate, and you, Brian, on talking about TAMing. We'll talk a little bit more about TAMs in episode 35 in 2 weeks. But anyway, shameless plug for RHEL Presents. Nate, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be at Red Hat?
Sure. So I don't know. Some people might know me from various things that I've already put out into the community, things like the Iron Sysadmin podcast, things like my own personal blog where I've done a lot of tech stuff. I'll give you links to those things if you want to put them in the show notes later. I'm
For
not
sure.
going to try to recite URLs for people to jot down, but I've been in IT since before it was even a career. It was a hobby of mine. I remember I tried to convince my my high school to convert from Windows NT to Red Hat Linux. So I've been doing this forever. So it's been a hobby before it was ever a career. But I've been a sysadmin for most of my life, or most of my career anyway. Although which is probably half my life at this point. Now that I think about it, that's sad. But anyway, I worked at a web host for a while. I worked in frontline support early in my career, like most people start. I worked as a network admin. I did some like Cisco stuff and Linux stuff and Windows administration. And I worked in higher ed for a while as primarily a RHEL person. And then all that experience from there really got me in with a bunch of contacts here at Red Hat. And the move to TAM just seemed to fit perfectly. So here I am.
Mm. It's great bringing that hands-on experience into a role where you're in a position to advise and share with other folks. While my position title may say marketing, I kind of see myself in a similar position where I'm just, hey, here's this really cool feature. Why don't we sit down and talk about it? In my case, they gave me a microphone and a live stream and said, here, go do something with this. And that's why we're here. So I was really excited when you asked if there was something we could talk about. And in the hour and a half long conversation that followed, we decided maybe this should have been an episode. So we are here today to talk about home labs. It's one of the things I love the most, and I think is almost, I don't know, dare I say that it's your career is dependent upon having a home lab of some scale. Now there's some folks that I know that could easily have tens of thousands of dollars sunk into their home lab. There's other people that I know that spin up a couple of low resourced cloud systems, whether it's Linode or DigitalOcean or even on one of the bigger platforms like AWS. But it seems like to some extent, if you're going to be successful as a systems administrator, you need to have something somewhere where you can play and get your hands dirty. And I think each of us kind of has an experience throughout our career and even today with home labs.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I think for me personally, like it's really important to have something that I fully control. And if I mess it up, it only impacts me. So I can really, feel free to explore and not worry about impacting anyone else, So that's my favorite thing about having a home lab is I can just do whatever I want and I'm not going to hurt anybody else. So
well,
yeah, I mean, absolutely. Right. Sorry, go ahead.
No,
I
go ahead.
was just going to say my home lab started as the place that I learned, the place that I got into IT, right? I mean, like I'm still living at home in my parents' basement and running a website on a shelf in the corner of my room, right? That got broken into and taken down by all kinds of crazy people because it was the 90s and that's, the IT security was just not there. But you rebuild, you learn, you rebuild, you learn, you rebuild, you learn, and before you know it, you're working as a sysadmin somewhere, right? I think having that interest and being able to have it at home, at my disposal, just like play around on it whenever I want to, that's what built my career. It's why I am where I am.
And much like the both of you, I started out in IT in the support desk. I moved away from help desk into desktop engineering, which is basically a help desk, but you have to go and deal with all the coffee spills and broken printers. So I very quickly moved away from desktop support. Windows and Active Directory domains were just we did not get along. Let me put it that way. And the scene in Office Space where they go and just take baseball bats to that printer, it just that scene really spoke to my soul. So I guess your homework for today is if you haven't already, go check out Office Space. It kind of epitomizes what it's like to be in IT in a business. Anyway, but I very quickly moved into server administration, and I was predominantly a Windows systems administrator, and I would volunteer to be the guy that would take care of the 3 or 4 random Linux boxes in some of the early companies I worked for. so it ended up becoming part of my reputation was, hey, Eric understands those weird Linux things. Let him take care of these servers. And so I can remember around 2011, I think it was. I was sitting in a bookstore and I had a copy of a Microsoft certification exam prep book, and in the other hand, I had a study guide for the RHCSA. And just looking at the two, it's like, what do I want out of my career? And that day, I put the Windows Server exam prep book back, and I took the RHCSA one home. I got a job as a full-time Linux systems administrator. I took my RHCSA exam later and passed it, and it wasn't enough. Like Brian, I wanted something somewhere where I could break it and no one would yell at me. So I kind of I duplicated my desktop build that I'd had at the time, and put I think it was RHEL for a while, CentOS Linux for a while. I kind of settled on Fedora at home until I came to Red Hat, and then of course everything moved back to RHEL, of course, and but for the most part, it would just sit there, and maybe this is something you all can speak to as well. But the server would sit there, it would idle every week or so. I'd run patches and reboot it, and think, okay, cool, it's up to the current patch level. I should probably do something with this. And so it finally dawned on me what I could do with it. I needed to put that server to work. I needed it to do something. So I started looking for projects. So my first ever at-home lab project was Minecraft. So, a few buddies and I were starting to get into Minecraft. It's like, hey, these public servers are nice, but what if I hosted one here at home and gave you all the IP address, and we could just connect to that instance and have our own little Minecraft world? So that's how that started. And then it moved into hosting a Plex server and moving into hosting Nextcloud. And so I've kind of gone back and forth over the years from, I'm going to pay for someone else to host all of my stuff because I don't want to mess with it, and then I'll swing back. In fact, this is where I'm at on the pendulum right now, is I'm swinging back to hosting things at home. And so contrary to Brian's point is, now I can't exactly just let things break, because if you start building in like home automation or Plex servers, then instead of having angry customers or an angry database administrator who says, hey, you broke my server, instead it's your wife and kids banging on your door going, Minecraft is down, or hey, I can't watch my movie on Plex, it's broken. And so I almost feel like I'm back as that's like my connection back to being a systems administrator to this day.
You're on call 24/7, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's a really valid point. And I know we probably intend to touch on this a little bit later, but burnout is a real thing, right? So if you do this as your day job and you're also the IT guy at home, and there's enough of that at home that you never really get to turn off, that becomes a problem. I went through that a couple of years ago. And like I said, we can talk about it now, we can talk about it later, whatever you want. But
Go for it.
It was... I was working as a full-time sysadmin. I also had a side business where I was running a web host out of my basement, which I don't recommend, folks. But I also had my own website, because obviously I had the internet service. I had the ability to run the sites right out of my house. So I was running my own website. I was running the podcast website. Really just anything IT related was in my house. Plus my Plex server, my kids' Minecraft server, my, whatever. Nextcloud was another one that I had running here at home. And it got to the point where, work stress was where it was, which was not like, there were points where work stress was fine, and there were other points where it was not. Then the side business had a certain amount of stress to it, because I always felt like we needed to do more with it to really get a decent return out of that. And then, of course, the home stuff was like everything from our home firewall to our Plex server to whatever was stuff I had to deal with. And I just got completely burned out. I didn't want to touch any of it. I was getting like snappy with the kids and everything, right? So I scaled all that back. I took my email and put it on, Zoho was a company I use for email now, instead of Gmail. I took my website, threw it on DigitalOcean. I took my Nextcloud instance and just turned it off, went to Google. The side business, which wasn't really making a lot of money anyway, my business partner unfortunately got sick, and then we turned it off. We just basically went out of business. And then, work was still where it was. Now that I'm here at Red Hat, the work stress is lower than it was as a sysadmin. So now I'm starting to bring some of it back home, but things like my production website, I don't think I'm ever going to bring back into my home lab. I like having a home lab, to Brian's point, that does not have any stress to it or as much stress to it. Yes, the Minecraft server, the Plex server, whatever. But I can't watch a movie is a lot different than my website is down or, whatever, especially if it's something that's bringing in revenue, which they aren't really, but you know what I mean. Anyway, long-winded way to say, be careful. Be careful how much you take in-house, because no matter how good you are, no matter how reliable your power is, no matter how good you think your internet access is, there's always going to be something where it's like, oh, now on top of my work stresses, I have to deal with this, right? Whereas if it's on a cloud provider or a colo somewhere, that's a little less.
Yeah, and a couple other concerns that a lot of people run into when they're running stuff at home is you need kind of some space to put this, especially if you're going to have like a rack mounted, server in your house. You also have to deal with the noise too, right? Depending on what kind of equipment you're going to have. So, I'll talk more about my lab later, but I've chosen to just use workstations that are very low noise and fairly small. But if you're going to have like really big, fancy rack mounted equipment, you're going to need some space, and you're probably going to not want to have it right here sitting next to you in your office because they're loud.
So we've got the question about burnout. Although I've noticed that as I've moved away from being a day-to-day sysadmin, when I moved into sales and then now marketing, I've like you, Nate, I've started to pull more things in-house. But in fact, I'm trying to migrate my website out of my WordPress website out of cPanel as we speak. And so if you go out to my website, it's actually down at the time of recording. But I toyed with bringing it into my home lab, and it's something's not working out. So I mean, that's kind of the gateway to my online persona, both personally and professionally. And so my website is down, and while that may not cost me dollars, that may cost me a connection that someone doesn't come to my website and put in, I don't know what it might be, like an interview request for a podcast or something along those lines. So I was running into some limitations with cPanel, but maybe pushing. I mean, we're Red Hat, so we always love the idea of being able to run a hybrid cloud. So I'm almost to the point where maybe my WordPress site needs to go out to DigitalOcean, and I can justify $5 a month and just set it up and forget it, and then run everything else inside my home network. That way, I know that server's out there, set up automatic updates. Set up WordPress to automatically update. So day to day, I don't have to touch it beyond going in and writing a new blog post or making sure that my social media links are up to date. So I think I can kind of have a little bit of a balance. And then one of the things that we've been covering on and off on the show was how to automate things, how to build better templates, how to have better security practices, and applying a lot of those to my home lab, I think might help balance the whole, hey, the Plex server's down. Yeah, but it's 9:00 at night. I just want to watch a movie. I don't want to go and troubleshoot it, to then basically be able to, I have system roles. I have Podman containers. I have all this set on a reboot and patching schedule throughout the month. So I don't have to really touch any of it. And if I can automate it away, it's still there. I can still play with it. I can still spin up a new container to try out some new thing. But then to set it aside and just have it basically work as almost a utility within the house. I think, I don't know, try me back in like eight weeks or so and see if that plan is working, or if I've even had time to enact that. But I mean, that's kind of the direction I'm going, as I'm swinging back from, I am so tired of paying $100 a year to 16 different services to provide all these things, rather just host it myself. And oh, by the way, we're running, we've got an appointment here next week. I'm so excited. We're going to mount some brand new access points. We're going to run networking cables through the walls so our Wi-Fi will be better. And I've got this beautiful rack mount, or I've got this beautiful 42U rack in our basement. And we'll get to some pictures, some show and tell here in a little bit, but I'm going to try and swing the pendulum back to self-hosted, but try and do it in a smart and automated, reproducible way. Since we're constantly telling customers and community members to automate things, maybe I should dog food some of the things that we talk about.
So, I mean, to your point, and this is B, right? I like the portability, right? So yes, my sites, Iron Sysadmin, my personal blog, and I have a third site. They're all WordPress, right? There is a million ways to host WordPress. Most of them are just like fork over some money, you've got a WordPress site.
Mm-hmm.
I like the control of being able to say, all right, I'm not locked into this WordPress provider. I have, in my case, I use containers. They're all Podman containers, which is why I've been helping Eric out with his Podman container problems. And really what spawned this show, but then we decided, well, whatever, we'll go over that later. But I have pod definitions and then data, right? The data I can back up, put whatever I want. The pod definitions I can spin up anywhere that runs Podman, right? So I can run that at home. All I need is the internet service that will allow it. I could run it on DigitalOcean. I could run it on Amazon. I could run it on anywhere that gives me a Linux box that runs Podman, right? And I like that. It costs a little bit more than the $5 a month that you might get to just say spin up WordPress and forget about it. You've got a little more overhead, but you can automate updates. That's the beauty of containers, right? I can pull in a new container and then I can run WordPress updates. Now I do still have to do some manual intervention when I do WordPress updates, but it's not like I need to keep the OS up to date. I need to keep the underlying infrastructure up to date. It's pull a new container, make sure the pod host is up to date, pull a new container, and do the WordPress updates. So it's really simplified, right? So anyway, I'm rambling, I think.
So
No, you're fine.
So one thing some of our people watching this might be thinking is like, well, why not just put everything in the cloud for your home lab? Like, why even bother having anything on site? So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on this. And me personally, like, I like having an upfront cost, and then not having to worry about paying additionally every month. So that's just for my personal finances. I like that aspect. Then I feel like I can also get a lot more out of a dedicated piece of hardware I have sitting here. I can, like, on my workstation I'm running 20 VMs. I don't know how much that would cost in a cloud environment, but it's going to probably be more than my yearly cost for this. So what do you guys think about comparing your home lab to just running it all in the cloud?
Go ahead, Nate.
Sure. So for me, and like I've gone back and forth on this a lot. I started with home hosting, like way back when I was running a BBS that you could telnet into. Who remembers BBSs, right? That's where I started, right? So I was effectively running production, quote unquote production, more like a hobby, right, out of my bedroom at home, right? And it felt free, right? And I say felt free because that's an important thing, right? Now, obviously, I was still living at home. I didn't pay the electric bill. I didn't pay the cable bill, right? So to me, it was free. My parents, on the other hand, they had to pay for electricity to run that thing 24/7, which wasn't much, one machine, whatever, right? But scale that up, right? So today, I've got a handful of servers, most of which are powered off. The reason they're powered off is because I'm paying the electric bill, right? My electric bill when I had the host running was like $400 a month, right? That's a lot of money when you think about it, right? And that's considerable. However, I had full control of that stack, right? Now, where do you want to spend your money is what it comes down to. I get mostly full control over my DigitalOcean box, which runs me about $60 a month, but that's really my entire web presence is in one machine, right? Which is easy to update, easy to maintain, easy to run, whatever. But I lose a little bit of my soul, I think, by giving it to a cloud provider, because I really would love it if I could say, oh, it's all down in my basement. I run it all because I'm that hardcore, right? That's me. Anyway, I guess those are kind of my thoughts. In my opinion, quasi production services, they belong somewhere you can guarantee, maybe not guarantee, but you can more guarantee uptime. If you can guarantee that in your basement, great. If you can't, then maybe you want to put them in a cloud host. If you don't want to spend the power bill, or if your power isn't dependable, right? I mean, there are places in this country that still have frequent power outages because of storms and whatever, or whatever other reason. Maybe your basement's not suited for that kind of thing. And investing in a generator or whatever, that's a whole lot of money. Not to mention cooling, noise, home comfort, right? If I had it running in my office right here, I couldn't record the podcast and whatever from my office. That's why it's got to be down in the basement. Some people don't have room for that.
So what I'm hearing, Nate, is we should all move back in with our parents and get some free electricity.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like this plan. And I'm kind of like Brian. I hate monthly fees. Any service, whether it's hobby or professional, if I can pay once up front and be done, I'd rather pay that. So I've done both. I've had desktops that have been converted to servers. I've had dedicated server hardware. I've bought refurbs. Right now, I've got a desktop. I've got a workstation here at my desk, and I've got a server in the basement that are custom built rigs. I've also done the cloud hosting thing, and I liked cloud hosting when I was in a small 1-bedroom apartment with really sorry cable connection where I'm sharing with 500 of my closest friends. Using the same pipe, it wasn't sustainable. So I've gone all in on cloud. I've gone all in at home, and I think finding that hybrid is the right approach, especially like you, Nate, with a podcast website, with a professional website that you host, things like that. I don't want to be on the hook for if a tornado sweeps through Kansas City and we're down for 3 hours with no power. I mean, granted, we've got solar panels, we've got a battery backup system tied into the house, which my server rack is tied into, thankfully. So I have enough power in that battery to go in and shut down unnecessary systems. Basically, is what the plan is there. But it's all about finding a balance. I don't want to pay $60, $70, $80 a month to a cloud provider to do something that may or may not get used every day. Like we'll see here in a minute, I've got 20 some odd VMs, and only about a third of them run 24/7. The others are like specific built for demos. Like if I'm doing an in-place upgrade from RHEL 7 to RHEL 8, I want to have that. I want to have those VMs just on standby. So in case somebody says, "Hey, how does this work?" Well, lucky for you, it just takes 17 seconds for my virtual machine to power up, and I can show you. And I've got templates, so I can blow this example away and do it again in 15 minutes. So it's all about finding that balance. And sadly, there's no magic formula. It's what do you want to get out of your home lab? For me, when I started, it was I wanted to be better at being a Linux systems administrator, and the only way to get better at anything is to do it as often as you can. So I switched my desktop over to Linux. I started building out a home server lab, and people thought I was nuts because I used to have Minecraft on one virtual machine. I'd have Nextcloud on another, and I'd have kind of a jump box on another VM. It's like, can't you run all that on the same system? It's like, yeah, I could, but then how do I work on some of the automation things? Because I'd learned SaltStack, I'd learned Ansible. It's like, if I have one system, there's not really much point in trying to create an automation system around my home lab. And so I actually started building out an Ansible playbook when I wanted to learn Ansible. It's like, how do I automate the things that drive me nuts? It's like, okay, cool. I've got Image Builder to create templates, and now I can take that template, I can install it in a virtual machine here in my home lab, and then I can apply my Ansible playbook to it, which creates my user, updates my SSH key, pulls down all my Git repositories. And now all I have to do is update the Ansible playbook, in theory. Of course, I never finished that project, but it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Are you trying to be a better sysadmin? Are you trying to cut down on costs? Which, doing the math, how much would you save doing self-hosted versus $20, $30, $40 to a cloud provider every month? Plus, if you're looking at self-hosting to replace some of your services, like maybe you rip your Blu-ray collection to a Plex server instead of paying for Netflix or whatever the case may be. Then you can factor that Netflix subscription into your Plex server. Or if you're like me and have a wife and 4 kids, then you have the Plex server and you have all these other subscriptions. Thank you, Disney and Netflix and everyone else that eats out of my wallet every month. But it's all about finding that balance and making sure that you're not overcommitting or overspending. Like I built out my dream server. Like if I got a platform that I liked and then maxed out all the specs, it was like $15,000. I probably don't need that. Do I really need 100 gig networking here in my house? Probably not.
Of course you do. I mean,
I
of
mean, why
course you
not?
do. Why wouldn't you?
although I have to say we are getting 10 gig networking put in the house here in next week. So expect pictures on my social media because I'm excited to have 10 gig networking in the house, and we're buying Wi-Fi 6 enabled access points. And so when you have 6 people and they all have multiple devices and you work from home, I came to grips a couple of years ago that I basically have to run my home network as if it is a small business, because that is the level of dependability that I need. I mean, especially in 2020 when we had 2 kids going to school. My wife was home all the time as a stay-at-home mom. We had my 2 toddlers, and then I was working from home. It's like, man, I'm going to have to set up, I don't know, VLANs or QoS or something, because I don't need their iPads on YouTube slowing down a sales presentation that's tied directly into my salary. So I think what might be a good thing to do is talk about what our home labs look like right now. Do a little show and tell. And I'm happy to share that in 34 episodes, I think this is the first time we've ever had a slide deck for the show. So we've done well. It took us 34 episodes to get here,
It's a
but
good record.
I blame Nate though, because he didn't want to
It's all my
pull
fault.
his webcam off of his desk and carry it around the house. So
I mean, I suppose I could just take the camera on my phone, walk down to my basement.
that's true. Which don't even, I mean, we're all, you and I host podcasts and live streams and videos and stuff, so don't even get me started about the sinkhole that is home labs, and then start talking about the sinkhole that is like live production gear.
Oh yeah, right. I could have a sound production studio and a data center in my house and still not be happy, right?
That's the direction I'm heading right now, and which here once we're done with the network wiring project, then I'm actually building out a studio in our basement, and it's my hope is to have like 2 different camera angles and lighting built into the ceiling, so I don't have extra stuff hanging off my desk. Anyway, we're not going down that path. That we'll have like a special edition of RHEL Presents or something, because that is a black hole of time and money all on its own.
All right, so we're looking at a picture here. This picture I took just earlier today. This is the rack I have in my basement. It used to be a full rack, but because of the space that I needed, I literally cut it in half with a hacksaw and welded it back together. I do own a welder. Those of you that know me know that I'm also into like Jeeps and stuff. On the other side of that glass door you see next to the tower is my garage where my Jeep is. That's where I do, cutting, welding, and whatever. So I have to close that door to make sure that my quote unquote data center doesn't get like welding slag on it. Anyway, this looks impressive, but you'll notice that most of these do not have blinky lights on them. So I'll go from top to bottom, right? The top of the rack there, you can see there's a Cisco switch. I actually inherited that from my last job. They did a big switch replacement. That switch is probably 15 years old because it was end of life. Cisco loves end of lifing gear. And when you're a higher education institution that has switches in every single building and every single dorm, you have a whole lot of gear that has to go back, right? Well, this was one that failed their inspection, so I got it because it had one bad port on it. So anyway, there's
that is a great point, and something we didn't talk about in the discussion earlier was as a systems administrator or any type of operations guy. That's actually a great way to start a lab. I had
it's a huge perk. Just wait till I get through all the pieces here.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. So then down from that is just a shelf. It's got my network, like my internet connection gear, and my Synology NAS. So that little white thing there is just the cable modem, and then next to it is a Synology NAS, which is the only piece in this entire puzzle that I purchased new. I'm gonna I dropped like a whopping $1,000 on that thing with drives just because I was tired of drives failing in the other machine I was using as just like an NFS server. So that's the only piece of new gear in this whole stack. Beneath that, there's a Dell server, which is probably 10 years old. That was a hypervisor at the college that was taken out of service, and I got it. If you turn it on, it sounds like a vacuum cleaner. So it's not on. Beneath that is a little 1U Dell PowerEdge. It's like it almost looks like it's the same server, but it's the only one with a green light on. That is my home lab. that that machine is like an R300 series, I think, a Dell
Mm,
PowerEdge R300. I got it secondhand from the web host I used to work for when they went out of business. This was a machine they had never put into service. So I got it almost
nice.
new, although it was about a year old because they were just dragging their feet on getting the thing into service. So that runs a libvirt hypervisor. It runs a handful of VMs. It needs more memory. It's only got like 32 gig of memory, which sounds like a lot, but in today's standards, it's almost nothing.
Oh,
Um,
not definitely not for a hypervisor.
right, right. It's fine for running like little test machines and whatever, which is primarily what I use it for. I also have a single Podman host on there that I run a number of things on, like my Valheim server and my kid's Minecraft server. It doesn't have the guts it needs to run Plex, which is what that other machine on the side is for, but I'll get to that. Beneath that is the UPS that I also inherited when a friend of mine whose father runs a ISP took it out of service. I replaced the batteries in it and into my rack it went. And beneath that is an IBM server, which also came from the college, which also is not running because I think it has a bad power supply, but it's too big and heavy to get out from underneath that stack. So it stays there to hold the rack down. And then on the side, I'm going to try to keep this short because I know that we only have so much time. But the day I started at the college, when I walked in, I had a brand new cubicle style office, brand new desk, brand new Aeron chair, and a box from Dell. And in that box from Dell was that workstation. That workstation served me for 8 years at the college. Then they finally replaced it with a MacBook, and they said, "Make this thing disappear. We don't want to deal with it." So it came home, and I turned it into a Docker host, and it's still running my Plex server today. That was 2008 2009 I started
My
at the college. So
gosh.
that's how old that machine is. It runs Plex better than the little 1U box. The only thing I don't like about it is that it's still RHEL, it's CentOS 7 with Docker on it. I wished it was RHEL with Podman, but I can't take the Plex server down that long, right, to upgrade the thing. So that'll be a future project. Or if anyone has a solution for a low power consumption Plex box, let me know. Hit me up on social media or something, because that's my goal. I want a little machine that'll run Plex, multiple streams. So that's my wish list. So yeah, that's my home lab. I had to literally dust it off to take that picture. Uh, you can see my water heater behind it, right? This is my
Mhm.
basement. So
And I see the big garage fan there for cooling, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah, no, that was used to dry out my crawl space when we had a water leak. That's the other thing you have to worry about when you keep it in your basement.
all right. Let me. I gotta switch slides here. All right, this is my project. That is a 42U rack that I found in Warrensburg, Missouri, so about 45 minutes from home on Facebook Marketplace. Some guy was selling it for $100. I was like, I will take that action, because any of us that have ever shopped for racks know that they are stupid expensive for how little materials actually go into it. So 42U rack for $100 versus if I went and got that new, that'd easily be like $2,000. It's like I'm not paying $2,000 just so my stuff can sit on a shelf. So one of the recent additions was a 40 some odd, or like a $25 shelf off of Newegg. So now my monitor and keyboard have a permanent place to live. There at the top, if any of you hang out with me on Matrix or anything, know that I just recently got the updates on the left there. That is a Ubiquiti Dream Machine Pro. It's got a hard disk drive for security cameras, which we're going to purchase. And then I've got a fiber connection in from Google Fiber. We just got upgraded actually about a year ago to their 2 gig plan. So I've got 2 gigs down, 1 gig up, and then that's actually a 10 gig router into a 10 gig switch. And then on the right, I kind of went a different route than you guys. That's a 4U Rosewell chassis off of Newegg. It's got like four hard drives, a couple of solid state drives, but all the internals are desktop grade. So it's a server, but it doesn't have the power requirements or the costs that's associated with true enterprise gear. So I custom built my own server, and that is my one and only host right now. It's got a 10 gig card in the back. As you can tell, I haven't done any cable management yet. Waiting on the network install next week. But so that is running RHEL 8.5, soon to be 9.0, and it is predominantly a virtual machine host. All of my production workloads are running in Podman containers on the bare metal. So my Plex server actually has been running fairly well since I moved it to a container on the metal, because inside that chassis is actually like a NVIDIA. I couldn't even tell you the model number. It's years old, but it's like a 2 gig graphics card, and I think that's what's been helping with our multiple stream issue. To your question, Nate.
That's what it takes, by the way. That's the reason that the little 1U box I have will not do Plex well, and the other machine will. The other machine has an ancient NVIDIA card in it. It's like a Quadro card. It's just a desktop graphics adapter. And it has a GPU, which is why it works. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're having that split between CPU and GPU seems to make Plex happy. And then there at the bottom, I bought a shiny 1U power. It's basically a surge protector, is all it is, with switches on the front. But that screenshot didn't really turn out well. But you can see I've got probably close to 15 different. Probably like 15 different virtual machines, everything from an SSH jump server to convert to RHEL tools to I've got a 3-node OpenShift cluster that I got the console up and running, and that's as much as I've touched it. So any OpenShift people out there, I'd love some good OpenShift home projects. I've got vanilla boxes for RHEL 6, RHEL 7, RHEL 8, and RHEL 9. Surprised I don't have my stream box up here yet, but I've got a virtual desktop that I'm trying to move. I would like to set up a dedicated graphics card and have virtual desktops in the house instead of everyone having a physical workstation. So as you can see, I've got all these different projects sitting in virtual machines at different levels of not running. But that's all running on that big host. And my hope is to eventually move to like an OpenShift virtualization cluster and play with that. But that's a ways off because you apparently have to understand OpenShift before you can use it. So that's kind of what I've been up to. Brian, I think
you have the home lab thing backwards. You're supposed to dive into something you don't understand and figure it out by fire.
Sadly, I've learned more things with that method by getting assigned a new project at work, and this is super high priority. I need you to understand how to do this and deploy it by like the end of next week. Well, okay, boss. Well, I'm going to head home early today, and you go home and you spin up that thing on your home lab and go, okay, cool. Push all these other projects out of my way, and now I've got a new project that will only get half finished that I need to figure out so I can come back to the office next day and act like I know what I'm doing.
The end of next week? That's generous. Usually it's the end of
That's fair.
Yeah, so I was gonna say my environment's not quite as fancy as both of yours. Instead of Google Fiber, I have 40 megabit DSL. So
oh man.
So anyway, and I went a little bit different route. So my main lab here is these 2 workstations. The reason why I wanted to go with workstations is they're very quiet. Like they're sitting here right next to me, and they're turned on all the time. So I don't have to worry about really noise and they don't produce too much heat or anything like that. So I really personally like the workstation for a lab environment. The one on the right is a Dell Precision T3610. I got this back in 2019, and it was refurbished. I bought it online, but it was a refurbished, workstation, and it was about $560. But it does have 128 gig of memory, which is one of the main things I was looking for. Is I wanted something that had a lot of memory, so I could run a lot of VMs on there.
Yep.
Because my main thing I'm trying to do with the lab is be able to spin up things like RHEL VMs, so I can write a blog on system roles. So, I'll need like 5 or 6 VMs running RHEL so I can try things out and experiment. And so I really use mine a lot just to try out different Red Hat products. And so I wanted something with a lot of memory. The one on the left is another, it's a Dell 9020 workstation. I got this one back in 2018, and it just only has 32 gig of RAM. So I do most of my work on the one on the right, and then if I have something I want to have on a separate piece of hardware, I can throw it on that other one. Both of mine are running Fedora 34 right now.
You're behind the times, bro.
Yeah. Well, Fedora 34 it's still supported. I do need to upgrade them though. Time flies by fast. It seems like I was just upgrading to 34 yesterday, but yeah, I need to.
Telling Matthew Miller.
Yeah. But 34 is still supported for a little bit longer, and I'll definitely get them upgraded before it goes out of support. So, but so I run Fedora, and then I use Cockpit to manage them from my laptop. So
that's a great point. In fact, let's shift over here because I actually don't have any crazy management software. I don't run any like dedicated hypervisor or anything here in my home lab. I like you're about to talk us through. I use the web console built into RHEL 8, and that's how I manage my virtual machines. I have to run a command line command to build thin provisioned hard drives, virtual hard disks. But other than that, I use Cockpit for mine. So why don't you walk us through your setup here?
Yeah, so I'm just logged into Cockpit here in Fedora, and this is the performance metrics page. And what's really nice about this is you can keep an eye on your CPU usage. You can hover here and see a breakdown of every core. I keep a close eye on the memory. This is the machine that has 128 gig of RAM, so I can see how much memory is being used. And then of course you can monitor your file systems and see how much space you have. Again, if you're running VMs, this is something you have to be really careful about because you can eat up a lot of space really quickly. And then of course you can with Cockpit you can see the historical performance graphs. You can see how things have been running. And then the other main thing that I do through Cockpit is manage my virtual machines. So if I go here to my list, you can see I think it's about 20 VMs running right now. And if you've read any of my blogs on system role stuff, you'll recognize some of these host names because these are the servers I use, the virtual machines I use to come up with the lab scenarios for the blog posts for things like system roles and web console and stuff like that. So what's really nice, managing VMs from here is I can go in, pull up one of these VMs. I can access a console on it, right? And then I can also go down and I do a lot with snapshots. So you can go through here. You can create new snapshots. You can restore snapshots. So this is what I use to really manage my VMs. Is just all through the Cockpit web interface here. You can add new disks, manage the network. All that stuff is super easy to do here from the web console.
Yeah, I got to say that as a, I don't even say grizzled old or classic sysadmin, I've always found the command line interface for things like libvirt to be so much more powerful than the GUI-based interfaces, right? And if you had asked me 5 years ago if I would ever say, yeah, I use web console for anything, right? Now, it's not an insult to web console, but I mean web consoles, the concept, right? The idea of like cPanel or whatever. I'd be like, no, I don't need that. I just use the CLI. The web console in RHEL, and specifically the virtual machine manager, is really, really nice. I mean, when I deployed my home lab, I first did it on Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization because I wanted a nice web management GUI, and the machine was just not up to the task. Like I said before, it's like 32 gig of memory. Half of that was used up by just the manager, right? So I scrapped that idea, and I just went with a RHEL box web console, and it's almost as good. Like this is almost an enterprise grade VM manager, right? Minus the clustering and stuff. And I don't know if there's already some kind of a plugin for clustering, but
well, I did notice. I think it was in the RHEL 9 beta that the web console virtual machine manager will actually support migrations. It's not live migration of VMs right now. It's you have to power them down. But the fact that, or maybe it is live migration. I actually don't have a second host. That's the only problem.
Yeah, so it does support, if you have shared storage, you can do live migrations with
Gotcha.
with the web console, and to Nate's point too as well. If you read carefully in the RHEL 8 and the RHEL 9 release notes, they both state that Vert Manager is deprecated, and the recommended replacement is the web console. So I would definitely recommend, if you are running VMs on RHEL or on Fedora, take a look at the web console, and this is going to be our recommended VM management solution moving forward.
And I recommend it for everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I manage my disks, and in fact, I let RHEL manage my my RAID array on my host. And instead of going in and reading up on the documentation and trying to remember what commands I needed to do to actually provision the RAID, I used the web console. And so from just basically just from the OS disks all the way down to the different logical volumes, I let web console handle it. It was great. I set up the bridge between between my virtual machines NICs and the physical network port. I set that up in web console, went in, opened up the firewall ports that the host needed, and I mean, 90+% of that server is managed and configured by web console, and it's amazing. And something you'd mentioned, Brian, that I kind of wanted to bring up is there is absolutely nothing wrong with repurposing workstations. I mean, you look at these companies that used to give everyone workstations, physical towers, and they'd use them for 3 years. They'd sit in the same exact place for 3 years. They wouldn't get moved. So, I mean, you can easily go out to a site like ServerMonkey, or I used to know a couple off the top of my head, but ServerMonkey just sticks with me. But it is so easy to go out to one of these enterprise hardware sites that they just collect things in mass and more or less refurb them and resell them at a fraction of the cost. So $1,000 workstation that you got from your employer, wait 3 years, and then you can buy that same workstation, which 3 years isn't too bad, but that's kind of the standard, it seems like, for enterprise hardware replacements. And you can buy that same server for less than 200, and like you, max out the RAM, put in SSDs instead of hard drives, and for less than $1,000, you've got a perfectly viable option for a virtualized lab environment.
Yeah, and again, my main motivation was the noise. Like, I wanted something I could just have sitting here next to me and not have it sound like an airplane taking off. So that was. So I was like, you know what? These workstations are the way to go for me. Unless you want to set it up like out in your garage, like or a closet like you have there, Eric. So.
Yeah, that's actually our furnace room. So my back was up against the furnace. So on the other side was a place for a couple of shelves, which of course I ripped the shelves out and put in my server rack instead. But yeah, I mean it works out great. The fiber drop is right there from the ISP, and so we just uncoiled it from where it was wrapped up in the wall and ran it over to the server rack, plugged in my router, my switch, my server. We're going to have a couple of security cameras at the front and back door, and then we're going to have a couple of access points all wired in. So it's my little server lab, and I'm really excited. I've been watching some refurbished 1U desktops on eBay that, like, from Facebook or something. They've got thousands of them in stock, and I was thinking about buying 3 of those and building a bare metal OpenShift cluster and seeing if I can't move all of my workloads off of that one box onto a cluster of 3. So I've got some redundancy and some load balancing there, and then basically convert that 4U box into just a big NAS, because that's where I'm blocked right now. Is my data drives are still spinning disk, and we've got so many movies and TV shows that we've ripped into our Plex server. It's great because I love not seeing the clutter. I hated digging through cabinet after cabinet looking for that one movie, and it's like, do we have that movie? Now just I I I dread thinking about how long it took me to get our movie and TV collection into our Plex server, but now that it's there, it's on a RAID array, and as long as the server itself doesn't explode, I don't have to go through that process again. They're all sitting in boxes in our basement. But it really saves time and space and energy, and I love hosting my own lab. So, wrapping up, the chat's been absolutely quiet today, which is kind of shocking. I was expecting a couple of holy wars between different platforms or hardware choices or anything, but the chat's been quiet. But so one of the things we talked about was running RHEL in our home labs, and so I think something that bears pointing out is that if you are a systems administrator and you want to run Red Hat products in your home lab, it doesn't cost you thousands of dollars in subscriptions to run a home lab, because we have what's called okay, so I just got a note that maybe our Restream bridge is broken, because I haven't seen any any chat at all. So might be an issue with the bridge we've got between the different platforms. So I'll check into that after the show. Again, once a sysadmin, always a sysadmin. But anyway, what I was pointing out was, if you look at developers.redhat.com, and maybe one of you guys can remind me of the direct link, but you can actually sign up for an individual developer subscription, which gives you 16 instances of Red Hat Enterprise Linux and a few other tools as well that you can run for personal use. It's not for there's some caveats around it, but more or less, if you're using it in a home lab, there's not really any limitations there. But go to developers.redhat.com and look for the developer for individuals subscription. That'll give you the chance to run Red Hat Enterprise Linux official products. But if you're like us, I go back and forth between, do I want my hypervisor to have all the latest features, or do I want to not have to reboot it every week? But a lot of times I'll run CentOS Stream or Fedora, with Fedora being at the head of the development lifecycle for RHEL now. You can run Fedora 35, Brian, or coming out here in a few weeks, Fedora 36 will be out, and so you can see what's coming in not Vert Manager, in Cockpit, which is the upstream for the RHEL web console, and see what's coming down the pipe. So it was really cool, because I started playing with Podman on Fedora before it was really stable on RHEL. So when it came to RHEL, and actually, Brian, as a TAM, you have as a TAM, you made a bunch of videos about RHEL 8 out on our YouTube channel, and so it was really great to see how to use it, but having some time to play with it in Fedora as it was working its way down the way. Anyway, we're at the top of the hour. My apologies to the YouTube group. Usually I try and be involved in the chat as well. Nate, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your lab, and
Absolutely.
Brian,
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Literally, just let us know. We'll have you on the show. If lost my train of thought. If you want more of Nate, you can find him at the Iron Sysadmin podcast. They're live, I think, every other Thursday evening.
The second and fourth Thursday. We tried to make it that way so people could plan, because every other Thursday moves around, right? When you think about it. So.
But then every now and then you get like a bonus episode. You get 3 episodes in a month instead of just 2.
Or every now and then you get 2 weeks off between shows. It depends how you look at it.
Fair enough. Brian, thank you so much for joining me as my co-host today. I really appreciate that. You help keep me sane and keep me on track. Again, apologies to the YouTube crowd. I'll check out the chat afterwards and comment anywhere. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend. We really enjoy doing these episodes, and join us again live in 2 weeks for RHEL Presents 35, where we're going to talk about TAMs and how to get more out of Red Hat with a TAM. And if you haven't already, go to redhat.com/summit and register, because May 10th and 11th, you will have access to hours of awesome content about Red Hat Enterprise Linux, OpenShift, Ansible, and kind of the future of Red Hat. So make sure to sign up for that as well. With that said, thank you all so much for joining us live or after the fact. Be sure to add your comments to this video because we do read those and follow up afterwards. Send us pictures on social media of your home labs and what you're doing. We'd love to hear from you all. Again, Nate, Brian, thank you so much. And to all of you watching, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good one.